Hello and welcome to the BNB show here with Seahawks Brendan Nelson making his return as we do a little bit of a game preview here and try to dive into a little bit more depth with this Atlanta Falcon matchup that is coming up this upcoming year. Brendan, it's good to have you back in, first of all. So thank you for jumping on in here. I appreciate you coming back into the Hawks Nest. And
no problem.
We've got a tough matchup coming up this week, tougher than maybe we thought it was going to be at the start of this offseason, as the Falcons have only lost by a mere 5 points combined to the two opponents that they've lost this year, and those are two quality opponents at that. As we approach into this game and you look at this Atlanta team, what are some of your initial thoughts on what you're seeing out of this team as far as that interest you in this matchup or difficulties?
Well, the main thing that I see when I look at the Falcons right now is that, well, first of all, they have some of my favorite young players in the league. They had a great draft. A lot of players that I, as a Seahawks fan, had my eye on ended up in Atlanta in this most recent draft. For the most part, I wouldn't say that they're paying dividends yet. You know, some of these guys are not even getting on the field yet. But kind of in the same way that Geno Smith has been a fairly steadying presence to our quarterback position. Not a great presence, but a steadying presence. That's kind of what Mariota's been for the Falcons, as near as I can tell. It's the same kind of general competency. And there have been a couple of things that have happened over there that have made them not miss Calvin Ridley nearly as much as I was expecting. That looked like it was going to be kind of a deal breaker for that team, but they've actually managed to put up points. And obviously Drake London's a big part of that, but there are some guys on this roster at wide receiver who I had barely heard of before this year that have actually been making contributions. The Olamide guy with the crazy name that I can't quite pronounce.
Like, I can't either. Don't ask me to.
Yeah. It's been better than I thought. We've talked about this before. We both like Cordarrelle Patterson. Very fun, interesting player. They're using him fairly well so far, I think. And yeah, I think that's the quick and eat dirty rundown of what the Falcons are through the first couple games here.
Yeah. What was your perspective on Mariota when he came out of Oregon and he was the number 1 overall pick? Were you on the Mariota train at that point in time, or were you like, number 1 overall?
Wait, was he number 1 or number 2?
Number 2. Sorry, number 2.
Okay. I was like, wait a minute. Well, I liked him more than Winston. I definitely remember liking him more than Winston. But I didn't think it was a great quarterback class. I did recognize that Mariota had problems. I didn't think he was terribly accurate. I thought he was a product of the system over there in Oregon. So I thought he was going to be a pretty decent pro. I didn't think he was going to earn the number 1 overall pick, but I thought he could earn, a place in the NFL. And he kind of didn't, given the fact that he washed out of his first stop. But he can play. He belongs in the league. He's at least as good as Jacoby Brissett.
I would give you that. Jacoby definitely doesn't give you a high baseline, but he is. I would take him over Jacoby. That is for sure. It was interesting with this chance he's getting now at the Atlanta Falcons, being, I guess it's his de facto third, because you would go first Titans, I think, and then second Raiders. And I mean, he didn't get a ton of chances there, but this is essentially that third team. In that you were looking again like that we saw with Geno a little bit of like, hey, now you've been in this league all these years. What parts now progresses forward from what you were? Are you just the same thing you were when you walked in the career, or have you kind of come forward in certain ways? I went and watched a little bit of this Rams game because on the surface of it, of course, he does seem to be playing competently from that angle of it. But then you go and watch the game and they're down in the third quarter, like 28-3. And then the Rams basically let their foot off the brake. And what stood out to me in watching that game is just like, he's really still looks really rough playing the quarterback position. I think he gets it done. Like he finds ways, but there's the play where he's rolling out on one play, Brendan falls down onto his knee, unassisted, just on a rollout, just kind of falls down, gets back up. He's got Donald and Floyd right in his face, and he just sort of throws a duck out to the outside on his tight end and actually gets a first down of it. And it was a play that to me just encompasses when I watch Mariota. That's what I feel like. It's just a lot of freneticness. And sometimes he can get something out of that, but it's not the cool, calm, collected quarterback play of a guy back there who's really under control with everything and just, not again, playing amazing, just feeling under control, I guess. He feels like the guy that's driving and it's like his legs are out the back because he's going so fast and he doesn't know if he's going to be able to stop or turn.
Sometimes Gino kind of feels like that, right? A little bit. Like
Yeah, he
he'll
can.
trip over his running back's leg. He'll turn the
Mhm.
wrong way trying to hand it off. I think we had one of those last week.
I agree. Yeah, no, he can definitely do that same kind of similar thing, and it's odd because again, these guys have been in the league this many years, and Mariota still, to my eyes, off of last week's tape, still looks like the guy who came in here. I mean, he's the guy that grounds a bubble screen, like puts it 3 feet in front of the guy. You go, how did it, And it could have been a worse day. They had an interception call back. I think another one, there was a different other issue that went on. So he definitely came out looking okay in that day, but I was not super impressed by what I saw of him. And I just kept coming back to, as we look forward on the keys on this game, Brendan, and the keys to getting to victory, specifically for this opponent we're going up against, you've got to get this ball in his hands. We've got to make it to where you mentioned Patterson, who we both do like, and they are using him, and they're using him a lot there as that running back now, not just a wide receiver kick returner, and he does still the kick return duties too as well. But you've got to put, from my standpoint, the first key that comes out the gate here is we've got to get the ball in Mariota's hands. I got to get him throwing 30, 35 times a game.
Yeah, and that's going to be hard to do with this run defense doing what it's doing through 2 games. And I got to say, we don't know who we're going to have right now. I don't know if you saw the injury report today, but Shelby Harris, question mark. I think Cody Barton's a question mark. There are some things that could prevent us from getting to that point because, yeah, you're right. Not only do you want to force Mariota to throw the ball a lot, you also don't want it to get to the point where he's able to do a lot of like that read option stuff as well. That's also an extension of the running game.
Sure.
With Mariota. That's how the Raiders used him a little bit, I believe. He was doing a lot of those QB runs from the read option when he was in Vegas. I'll get it eventually, I promise.
I don't got it. Hey, I'm not going to call you on it. It's going to take me like 5 more years before that's going to finally lock in.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that overall, you look at it and you go, yeah, we're going to need to force them to throw the ball, but can we? Because through 2 games, the run defense has not been good, and I don't see anything going on with this team that indicates it's going to be better right now.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely in the same kind of boat. And certainly the injury situation is worrisome considering already our defensive line is underperformed. Hopefully Miles Adams could come in there and give you a little bit of a shot in the arm on that line a little bit, or some of the underperforming guys like a Monet can kind of come up and step up and give you something a little bit better and more productivity off that side of things. You mentioned Ridley was suspended. Drake London and the Olama Babadudui Bawahui. You pronounce it better than I'm gonna make you pronounce it, but he's out there as well. So he does pronounce. He gives them, obviously Pitts is a guy out there who hasn't done as well to start out this year, but I think it's as much because he's probably gaining a lot of attention. That's at least what it seemed like in the Rams game, is that he was definitely on their mind as far as worrying about. There's not a lot of issues on that offense, but that is one of them, Brendan, that you have to look at, is those Pitts on the outside. He is kind of a scary player in that respect.
Yeah. I made the decision to build my fantasy football team this year around Kyle Pitts. It's not worked out well. It's gone very poorly.
Oh, bro, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it was my favorite of the choices that was offered to me at that point, but it has not worked out. Not worked out at all. However, do you kind of feel like this could be? I had a couple people in my chat last night talking about this. Could this be the double get right game? 1 for Kyle Pitts and 2 for DK Metcalf. 2 studs. They've not had big production yet this year. Do you think it could be the double get right game?
Well, we mentioned there's a lot of similarities between Geno Smith and Mariota on the other side of it, and sort of how they play. And the one place I would say that there is a difference, we haven't seen that in Geno, but in looking at the All-22 tape, Brendan, I don't think he was asked to do it. So that's really the key part of it. Geno can push the ball up the football field. Does Drew Lock have a bigger arm and a little bit more lively down the field? Yes, but that doesn't mean that Geno necessarily has like a soft arm or can't push it down the field. They are very careful with how they utilize him with making those kind of throws. So he's got the ability. I think part of what's holding Pitts back, and somebody, again, I'm not to hammer on it, but just watching that Rams game in Mariota on some of those throws, it's really rough with where he's playing the quarterback position right now. And I don't know that coaching staff has a lot of trust in his ability to push the ball up the field for them. He got 1 pass interference on Pitts. That was the one ball that looked good, but that was the only time that they really, the other time he threw it up, it was an interception called back. It's a little fluttering. It's got no spiral to it, Brendan. The motion still is kind of wonky as he's coming around the side on the body with it as he goes. It's not been cleaned up in that aspect of things. I think
Right.
I'm trying to say your fantasy football team is probably in that Esser,
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if Herbert's out, because he's my quarterback. But,
Lordy.
but, when we were scouting quarterbacks this offseason, when I was looking at Desmond Ridder, I liked a lot of things about him. One thing I said I wasn't so sure about was the arm. So all that being said, do you think that Ridder right now has a better arm in terms of just like strength and ability to zip the ball in there than what you've seen from Mariota so far?
Yeah.
You do?
It's hard to say, because with Mariota, is as much as just if he's not able to just set into his throws, that's where it goes for him. So if he's in the pocket and hits his back foot and lets it rip, it's coming out with some good velocity. It looks really good, and it's better than probably even what Ridder has. That's probably what projected to that number 2 overall pick. But when he's got to move, and he's a movement-based quarterback, Brendan, so this is kind of an issue, right? If he's got to go to his left or right, the velocity loses, the spiral goes, he starts to fall away on it a little bit. The mechanics just really lose him at that point. He can't remain consistent. So at that point, Ridder's better, because Ridder can throw in the move. Ridder can kind of go off platform a little bit in how he goes at it. So he's he's comfortable going sidearm, where Mariota's got to come with his same delivery every time and find a way to get through. I think Ridder's probably better. They think where the coaching staff's it's very close, but where the coaching staff's leaning towards is you got to look at that offensive line. And the thing Mariota can do that Ridder can't do as much. Ridder's okay mobility wise, but Mariota does have better mobility. And that is a problem right now with this line, where there's going to be protection breakdowns, and you're going to need your guy to get them out of trouble from time to time.
Yeah, that's one thing I also noticed looking at this Falcons team initially. That offensive line, it's got some real problems. I think the one guy they have on that line who's playing good so far this year is Lindstrom, the Boston College guy. Seems like he's doing his thing. But other than that, they've got Drew Dahlman, who I remember liking in the draft, but I certainly didn't like him as a starter. I liked him as depth. And he is starting for them so far, right? Drew Dahlman?
Worst performing lineman on that line right now, and starting for him, yes.
Yeah. So they've got issues up there. So maybe they're just looking at it like, okay, we see what's going on with Joe Burrow in Cincinnati already. He has seen ghosts. Why would we put our young quarterback, who might be our future, in a situation where a year or two from now he may be seeing ghosts? Because I like Ridder. I think he is going to be a good pro. And maybe they're just looking at this like, we don't care what happens this year. We're not going to put Ridder in this situation. So yeah, this offensive line, it's a problem.
And Matthews is like so, but then the other two guys are bad. And you're right. It's in that state. I think they're in the place, Brendan. Don't you think they feel like they're in a very much, it's not talked about as much, but to a lesser degree, they're doing the same thing that we sort of did with Russ, in the respect of they're going, okay, we're going to take this dead money to move Matt Ryan. We've got to turn this thing over. It's a relatively new coaching staff. Obviously the roster's not there where it was when we made our Super Bowl run, anywhere close to that. So let's make this year that year of pain to get through to the other side of it.
Yeah, I guess the difference would be that they actually drafted their quarterback to sit him, whereas we decided to kick it over to next year. I like the way we did things better, because I like next year's QB crop way more than this one. But I think fundamentally you're right, especially when the Calvin Ridley thing happened. When the Calvin Ridley thing happened, at that point, mentally for you, it's got to be like, well, what's even the point in trying this year?
Mm-hmm.
What is even the purpose of us trying to go win this year when our offense has basically just been completely neutered? And honestly, it looks like they may have gotten rid of Matt Ryan at the exact right time, if you take a look at what's going on so far. But regardless, yeah, I think that's actually a pretty good way of looking at it. Just kind of take the year off.
Yeah, I love it, because it's a committing to one side. It's that, as I always say, Brendan, commit to a lane. I might disagree with the lane you choose, but at least I can get behind the fact that you committed to it, as opposed to trying to put your foot in both two different lanes at the same time and trying to ride them both a little bit, it turns out you just don't get the success by trying to do that type of standpoint. It might also be nice, Brendan, with this Ridder situation, then in our passing of him, then has Atlanta cause him to be taken by them, which then has us, let's say next year, right around the same draft slot as Atlanta. Let's say they're maybe just right in front of us, because we beat them this week, so the tiebreaker goes to us. But they're below us, quarterbacks on the board. They've got Ridder. They don't go for the quarterback because they don't feel they're trying to go build the rest of the team up. Let's get an offensive line in here for Ritter. And then we get onto our quarterback. Game, set, match for Schneider at that point.
Yeah, you got to say they did the right thing because, again, I like Ritter, but there are probably going to be at least 4 quarterbacks in this draft that I like more than Ritter. And I think that's at minimum, honestly.
Oh, at minimum. If we're talking about guys with potential, Brendan, because an Anthony Richardson type could enter this draft and he's going to be a couple years away, but potential-wise, he's much further, way above where Ritter's top end is, which he's going to hit his top end quick, which is the nice part. He's going to be relatively pro-ready, but it's again where I wonder what their pick on that, where you have a guy to sit who's more of the pro-ready guy of the quarterbacks in this last draft. We'll see, though. I'm sure he'll end up on the field at some point this year. They're going to give him a little bit of a look-see one way or another. Got a couple donations here. Robbie Red with a $2 donation. Thank you, Robbie. Says Shane Waldron on the hot seat. Tough calls for the 49ers. You buying this as Waldron? Is this Carroll? Is this all Waldron? Is this mostly Waldron, some Carroll?
Well, first of all, I don't think anybody's on the hot seat right now. First of all, most teams
Agreed.
don't believe in firing coaches midseason. So you're not going to see that. Possibly we decide to go another way at the end of the year, but I don't buy that he's on any kind of hot seat. As for who to blame for what's going on right now, it's just so hard to know. It kind of makes me think of the Pete or John stuff that we always did over these last several years, where we didn't know who was making the personnel decisions, Pete or John. Now it's like we're looking at this offense and we're like, okay, who's doing the play calling? Who's designing this offense in general? Is it Pete or is it Shane? We had that clip last year against Jacksonville where Pete is clearly micromanaging the offense. Is that still happening? It's just so hard for us to know. It feels like a Pete offense in many ways, but then again, there are no deep shots. That we're not taking any shots down the field, and that's the hallmark of a Pete offense. He loves to just throw everything deep down the field, run the ball, and live with a bunch of punts. So the fact that everything is so short and near the line of scrimmage with like 1 or 2 exceptions, that makes me think it's Shane. Maybe it's just a mix of the two that really doesn't work that well. And then again, I also say it's 2 weeks in. We need to give this more time before we draw any massive conclusions.
Agreed. I think too, Carroll gave you a little bit of a tip of the hand here, just a tiny bit when he was mentioning about not wanting to put those rookie tackles for too long on an island. And if you want to go you want to get the deep shots, those are long developing plays that require pass protection to hold up. And I don't know if they had the confidence coming in against Eric Armstead and Bosa on those sides for those guys to be able to just maintain those blocks long enough for the routes to develop. I think that they have to. I think one way or another, those guys are going to have times they're going to build the blocks, but you can't just toss those plays out of your playbook. But Carroll saying that to me, Brendan, seems to illustrate to me it was really a top-down decision rather than just a Waldron decision when it came to that. Why there were no deep passes or no situations where they were really pressing the ball deep down the field this game, where the team saying, no, we want to protect our guys. And I do agree with you, though. Also on the other side of this is a Waldron offense we're watching right now. That what we saw last week was Waldron, and it was Waldron's offense with probably Keith Carroll, or maybe it was everybody agreed on it. Like they took up a poll of like, do we let these tackles sit on an island on 7-step drops? No, could have been that. Who knows who? But it was probably less a Waldron decision on that. But he took those out of his playbook. Everything else was pretty much purified Waldron as far as the passing game goes, minus of course fly sweeps, bubble screens, traditional screens, flood zone concepts. Beyond those things, it was completely a Rams offense, Brendan.
Yeah.
Thank you though, Robbie. Chase Stern with a $5 donation. Thank you, Chase. It says, I want to get the ball in DK's hands. Terrell is good, but he's not big enough to guard DK. You go ahead to Terrell this week.
I don't know if I'm going at him, but I can't be scared of him. I got to do what I got to do. And AJ Terrell, I know he's a great player. I don't get the impression he's off to the best start this year. I think he's given up some stuff. PFF grade is tepid. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you can't be afraid. You can't be afraid of him just because he's AJ Terrell. And DK has proven that he can beat the best players in the league. And you got to give him that opportunity. And you can tell, not that you can cater to his every whim, but he is starting to get a little frustrated with the way this season has started. I don't think you can totally blame him. So, yeah, if you got to go at AJ Terrell, then that's what it is.
Yes, agreed. And luckily too, we've actually have a little bit of a recent history with this where their first game, these guys were matched up. And if I'm not mistaken, in that game, DK got Terrell, including on a double move sluggo route, got
Mhm.
him for a stop and go. So he hit him a couple times in that first year, like Brendan said. And this was backed up with what I saw in the Rams game. They went at AJ. So the Rams weren't scared of him. Stafford wasn't scared of going over there. They definitely attacked pretty well over on that side with him. And I would hope that our Seahawks would do the same. I know this is going to be a spot that will continue to grow if DK shows frustration with this, but I will maintain that when it comes to DK being frustrated with the situation, if I look at the situation and go, well, yeah, it's understandable. And I look at the situation, you've taken no deep shots through 2 games to DK Metcalf outside of the one that you did that he made a one-handed catch and it was called back for things outside of his control. It
Mhm.
seems like maybe you want to utilize that. And if you're not utilizing that, maybe that player would be a little bit frustrated in that given situation because it's kind of weird that you're not doing so. And I understand that they're protecting the tackles this week. And last week it was Chubb and Gregory, but okay, that's the NFL. NFL is that teams have good pass rushers week in and week out. It's rare you're going to have a team like this week in Falcons where Ebiketti's a rookie and Grady Jarrett's down there, and then that's it. That's really all you've got to really deal with as far as a pass rush goes. That's not how it's going to normally be. And Brendan, to me, I feel like this team needs to commit to trying at least 3 to 4 deep shots over the course of the game. You can mix it up between Tyler Lockett and DK, however you want to do it. But I think that they've got to try to put these in, even if it's a matter of, well, we're losing a play. Well, so what? You're not getting the production on just simply moving the chains, and teams are squeezing things down on you. We saw it from the Broncos in the week 1. The Niners were doing it last week as well. They were bringing that extra man in the box a lot. You got to take that. You got to take those deep shots, don't you? You've got to commit to doing it.
Yeah, it's like I said, a offense with no deep shots is like a NBA offense with a point guard that never shoots threes. It just completely changes the way you play for the worst. It makes life so much easier for defenses when they don't have to think about it. They get to sag 6 feet off you, and just like that, and NFL defenses get to not worry about getting beat over the top. So yeah, you have a quarterback who can do it. You have receivers who are great at it. And while the offensive line hasn't played perfect so far this year, they're playing well enough to where you can do it sometimes. So it's time to go.
Yeah, I agreed. I mean, that's the one thing like with Blythe. Blythe's been horrible as far as a run blocker, but he's actually held up reasonably decently in pass protection. So
Hmm.
it's like, okay, let's lean into some of our strengths on that with as far as especially again, just commit to at least a couple times. At least put the fear in the team's heart that you could go to it if they don't commit the resources to keeping the safeties deep.
Right.
This Falcon defense loves to be, it was funny watching the tape. They're running some of our fronts, Brendan. They're running that weird 4-man front I talk about. So that was odd watching in that game. And they are also known the last couple of years for being this highly blitz, highly aggressive team. And despite doing that, they've been a very bad team over last couple of years, trying to accomplish that. They were a little bit more conservative in this Rams game as far as their approach. They didn't bring the house as much. But when you have a team like this that's trying to send everybody at you, what are the ways that you see as far as what they should be thinking about as far as ways to attack? Is it featuring in more bubble screens, or is it always making sure we've got our hot route read going? Is there anything specific to you that stands out where you go, this with a team that wants to throw a lot at you and want to be all varied and stuff? And is this a good matchup for Seattle going against defense like this versus San Francisco that was more sitting back and just bring the front four at you?
Well, it probably is. It probably is a better matchup than the Niners just because of the level of talent on the Niners side versus the level of talent on the Falcons side. I will say though, when you're up against a defense like that, you kind of want to be able to do like screens. You want to be able to do misdirection. And that's not really the stuff we're great at.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of hoping that after moving on from Russ and going to an admittedly worse quarterback, we.
Oh, you're muted. You muted on.
Oh,
Oh, you're
okay,
good.
that happened. Sorry about that.
You're good.
Anyway, my belief is that you would want to run a lot of screens against a team like that, and that's just not something that we're good at. So that's unfortunate because it is something that I was hoping we were going to get better at this year. But yeah, I would certainly rather play them than the 49ers, right? That defense is good.
Yeah. No, and look, they're aggressive, but their aggressiveness is not accomplishing them a whole lot at this point, and they are still definitely talent deprived over on that side of the ball, as their approach seemed to be when they were in their quote unquote Super Bowl window. Let's make the super offense and we'll get by with defense, and having a great defensive coach who can mold up or coach up maybe that talent that's not as elite across the board to get us over that hump. That seemed to be kind of their track of it. Now they're sort of, re-putting things back together in the way that they're going to do moving into the future, but they've got to kind of work from scratch just a little bit in that respect of things. So defensively, we want to get this ball into Mariota's hands. We want to get him pass happy, one dimensional, which is of course Carroll's bread and butter to his defense. We don't have to worry as much deep in this game. Is this a week that you bring out more pressure based packages because you don't worry as much about the guy? Russell, you have to worry about the deep ball. Last week, Garoppolo, you didn't have to worry about as much, I guess, but they didn't really press down on the routes last week either. There was a lot of soft zone and let's protect the deep half of the field, make them earn it.
Yeah, well, you were game planning for Trey Lance, right?
You were. And they didn't change. Yes, 100%. And then they didn't change when Garoppolo came in. They didn't go, okay, Lance is no longer in here. Now would you say that?
Yeah, I will say, though, it's hard to change your game plan in the middle of a game. Halftime adjustments are a thing, but I'm not blaming anybody necessarily for building a game plan around quarterback X and not being able to easily adjust when quarterback Y comes in. I get that.
Yeah. No, it's understandable. Most teams are going to be that way. That's why you have the whole week of preparation and you utilize that whole week of preparation. But would you lean into saying this week, try to get a little more? I mean, I'm not trusting the front four myself to get much any pressure. It seems like a week where I'm going, okay, maybe we need to try to manufacture a little bit of those quarterback hits.
Yeah, just last night, actually, I went through the charts on our pressures against the Niners. It was bad. It was really, really bad. 5 total quarterback pressures in that whole game.
Yeah.
All from Mafe and Nwosu. Nothing from the defensive line, nothing from Taylor. There were a couple of cornerback and defensive back blitzes that didn't get home. Like it was as bad as the worst games for the pass rush last year. And last year there were some games where the pass rush really didn't show up. But this was really bad. So you have to. I don't expect Shelby Harris to play. And he's your one defensive lineman that is really well-rounded and able to do a lot for you consistently. So you're going to have to come up with some way to manufacture it. Yeah. And look, Jordan Brooks still looks like a huge coverage liability. Let's see what he can do as a blitzer. That's something that I think he can do. So let's see that on the blitz. There's this one play last week where we sent Josh Jones on a blitz, and it is so like you look at Jamal on the blitz and then you look at Josh Jones on the blitz and you're just like, yeah, that's what made Jamal special. That's why we wanted him here, because it's not even a comparison.
Oh, no, yeah. You knew it wasn't going to work if they tried it because it's just such a specialized skill set, and those safeties just don't tend to have that in their bag. I mean, even it's rare. I count on my hand, I think, the number of really good ones I've seen blitz in my life.
Yeah, but yeah, you got to come up with something. I think we had Kobe on one nickel blitz in that game. Maybe you do a little bit more of that. Just throw some stuff at him. It's not going to be like the Kyle Shanahan Niners offense that feels like it's ready for everything sometimes. This is an offense that you should be able to. Although I do like the coach. Who's the guy from Tennessee? Arthur
Smith.
Arthur Smith. Yeah, I do like him. This is not the same kind of offense that is just going to be ready for everything you throw at it. So, yeah, you got to throw some stuff at it.
You just do. And we got to talk here in a second a little bit about Darrell Taylor on this, but it's, if you can't get it from your guys, you got to acknowledge it and stop expecting they're going to pull something off that they're not capable of pulling off. And maybe they develop it as the year goes along, but right now you got to find a way to not make allow these quarterbacks to be as comfortable in the pocket. And you're playing at home, so it'll be a little bit better, I think, because you are playing at home. But what has happened to Darrell Taylor this year, Brendan? What's going on?
The thing that bothers me the most is the fact that he can't tackle. How many tackles has he missed so far? That's something that should just be, fundamentals, right? It's about effort, execution, and fundamentals. It's not about you getting beat. It's just about you not executing on the most basic of levels. And I'm trying to figure it out as well. Sometimes it seems like he's a little too amped up and needs to pull it back a little bit, like the way he's overrunning some of these plays. But there may be some fundamental problems with him that just won't get fixed, but I still believe he can be a good player. I don't see any reason to believe otherwise there. But maybe I was going a little too far when I was talking about him. I never thought he was going to be Von Miller, but I thought he could get to a point where he was not far away from that. But right now, he looks very far away from that.
Should Mafe be starting in front of him right now?
No, I don't think so. It's too early to say that. And look, Mafe at this point in his career, I think there's a good chance he's going to be one of those players who is good in short bursts. But if you put him on the field for the whole game, you're going to start to notice the issues because he's a raw developmental player. It kind of makes me think of Ryan Neal last year. A lot of people loved Ryan Neal last year when he was playing like 12 snaps a game as a dime corner. But then you started him at safety when Jamal got hurt. And not good, not so good. It's like, you like Ryan Neal and then you try to eat the whole bag of Ryan Neal in one sitting, and by the end you got a stomach ache. That's kind of how I always put it. Sometimes you got to stop at just a few. You can't eat the whole bag. And Boye Mafe at this point in his career may be a player like that, I think.
Yeah, it's possible with it. The one thing I would say would be difference on Neal is Neal's an undrafted rookie free agent from a talent level standpoint, and Mafe's a very high second round guy with a lot of natural talent. You're right about being rough, but you've got a corner starting on the outside that was at the very least as equally rough, if not more so rough, coming out of college this year. And that's not precluded Seattle from putting him out there. And I think when I watched this tape, man, I'll tell you, it's one of the things that stood out most to me from watching the All-22 tape was there was a very keen difference between Darrell Taylor trying to set an edge on his side and Boye Mafe trying to set the edge on his side. And Mafe roots down, sets down, doesn't get moved. Taylor's like he's got helium. He's like the guy from Up. He's got that amount of balloons coming out his back. And the second he gets hit, it's like he gets thrown into the air. It's like he's on the moon or something, and there's reduced gravity. And I don't understand why, because he's not a like necessarily super light guy, but it's just any kind of context sends him kind of flying. And you're right about the over pursuit. That shows up over and over again where he's just going 100 miles into, I've got one direction I'm going to go, and that's all where I'm going to go. And he can't reroute or kind of read and react a bit in space on what he's seeing. He's just going to go 100%. That Debo play, Brendan, when you go back and watch it on tape, they're running a read option. They're running a fly sweep to Darrell Taylor's side of the field, right? And they're leaving him unblocked in the play. Mm-hmm. That to me is such an indictment because of the fact not only is it bad he doesn't make the tackle, it's bad that the San Francisco 49ers felt so confident as to run right into his face mask with the play unblocked and still think that they had a pretty good amount of confidence he was going to get by that Debo would get by Darrell.
Ask me again in a couple weeks. I might change my mind. I may change my mind on this. Right now, I just don't want to make a snap decision based on a couple of games. I just don't want to, in a year where I already knew things were going to be kind of difficult, where I knew that we weren't going to be winning a lot of games, there would be a lot of trials and tribulations. I don't want to make a decision too quickly here. Mm-hmm. But give me a few weeks, I may change. It would not be hard. Like you want, theoretically, you would then want Mafe on the field on early downs and Taylor on the field on late downs. So if that's the case, maybe.
That's what I'm advocating for, where it's not that I'm looking to necessarily increase a ton more snaps for Mafe, though he's going to get more because he is on the early downs. It's more just that you take and flip their snaps. Give me Taylor now coming in as the pass rush deserter. I'm hearing from some of my people in the chat saying, well, I think maybe the reason Taylor's not able to get any pressures, let's take out his run liability stuff. Why isn't he generating pressures? And the big thing is, well, maybe he's gassed out from having to play the run. And
well, I want to say one thing. He did generate pressure against the Broncos. There were
some holding calls, that didn't go called.
Yeah, a couple of them were also the kind of designed pressure where Denver lets him through so they can throw a screen. Like They did quite a bit of that. Like that stuff, I know it's not the same, but he did actually have quite a few pressures against the Broncos. I don't want to completely dismiss that.
No, there's a couple there, but you're certainly not feeling any sort of consistency over 2 games from him as far as that guy that's a passer. Not to say dominant, but just to feel him as making quarterbacks uncomfortable, and that he's like Uchenna. Like Uchenna, I can feel what he's doing over there. It's not just about getting inside. He's coming out, he's causing pressures, he's making stuff happen. And not always is it just what you're seeing in the stat chart, though it was in week 1 for him. It's just that what you're seeing with your eyes. And with Darrell, it's just you're over and over with your eyes going, okay, he's getting washed out here. Oh, he overbid on the play fake here. Now he's completely ran out of the play. Oh, he just missed another tackle there where he had a free tackle right in his face there where he just kind of whiffed on it. But you're right. We got time to watch this and monitor it and see how he does, continue to develop. One thing is nice with this, Brendan, that we can say with this, though. It is nice seeing Boye coming along here a little bit, that he is showing those flashes in his play of, and I'm not talking about the sack even, I'm talking about him stopping the run in this game and how good he looked in that. That's why he was where he was, rated in this game from a PFF standpoint as our highest rated defender, was because of the fact he was setting the edge so well and rooting down there and getting off his block. It was good to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Fun fact, by the way, not really apropos of anything. I was doing research on this earlier this week. Dwayne Eskridge and Darrell Taylor were born on almost the exact same day. Kind of because, I was researching their exact age to make the point that these are not young guys anymore.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, born on almost the exact same day. So yeah, both those guys, get it together soon. You're not 21-year-olds.
There was a weird moon rising on those days, maybe, not good on the injury fronts for those two on that, but hopefully they can come along. We need them, man. Both those two guys, we need this a week to implement more Dwayne Eskridge and try to, again, talk about manufacturing defensively with pressure. How about manufacture with the offense? You got nailing offense, can move the ball, getting some fly sweeps in there. Just like I said, to go into DK, you'd make me a happy man if you threw 3 deep shots in this game and ran 3 fly sweeps. I'd right out the gate give like Waldron a good plus grade on the day just doing that alone, because it's been so hard to drive that out. So, and I think there'd be success. You'd watch, you go, wow, 3 runs for 21 yards. And DK caught 2 of those passes for 72 yards. Like, wow, it actually, it works when you go to it. Right. What a concept. It's amazing. Dennis McComber, thank you for the $10 donation, Dennis. I really appreciate it. It says, love both your channels. Thanks for all the time you put in. Well, appreciate it, Dennis. And of course, I probably haven't said this yet, Brendan, but do go over to Seahawks Brendan Nelson here on YouTube. That is his channel name. And make sure you do subscribe to his channel. It will be very much appreciated. But thank you, Dennis. Very kind on you on the donation. Another thing I want to talk about, Brendan, is how are we going to fix a problem right now where our guys are seemingly getting double teamed, not able to get penetration on the defensive line, and our linebackers are also then taking on a lot of extra guards downhill. Carroll talked about the linebackers getting washed out a lot because they're not keeping them clean up front. Is there a solution to this long-term over the course of the season, or is this just is what it is, and it's a liability on this team going through the rest of part of this year, and there's not really an adjustment that they can make? And I don't know. I have an answer on this one, by the way.
Well, is this the consequence of the wide 9, where you only have 2 real defensive linemen on the field? Because you can double team those defensive linemen and confidently win those battles to where they can then peel up to get to a linebacker as well. Is that what it is? Maybe.
It's a very good possibility of it that's a bit of a smoking gun here, because it's a formation that there's not a lot of history of its use here in the NFL recently, to my eyes. Maybe it's a college thing that's being used all across the board, but in college I see even more like the 3-man fronts than I see like a 2-man front. So I don't, again, trying to understand conceptually how it is that this works for anybody in any way for the reasons you just said, where you're just setting yourself up, it seems like, behind the 8 ball a bit prior to the snap in your formations and alignments with it and the distance on those guys.
Yeah. I had a friend who was an Eagles fan, and they were running wide 9 one year. God, less than 10 years ago, but more than 5 years ago. And I believe they had Jason Babin on that team, and he had 18 sacks that year. And every Eagles fan still hated him. He was so bad against the run in that wide 9 that it didn't matter. Like, he literally was one of the league leaders in sacks, and it did not matter. So there is a little bit of a history of the wide 9, but you're not good luck stopping the run. Yeah. So I don't know why it's such a big part of this team, knowing that our head coach is Pete Carroll, knowing that our head coach is somebody who wants to stop the run. I kind of get it against the Niners because Shelby Harris got hurt, and you didn't really have enough defensive linemen to do all the stuff you probably wanted to do. But I also have to ask, could maybe be a little creative and just let Taylor maybe just play as defensive lineman for a game? Probably would have been better than what we saw, right?
Couldn't have been worse. Definitely couldn't have been worse. They're going to eventually pull the brakes on this one way or another, Brendan, from Carroll's standpoint, because he's not going to want to live with a team that's given up the run. You mentioned that this had echoes of last year in this kind of game. It looks similar last year. And I'll give you that we had 2 games in the Indianapolis game, not the Indianapolis game. It was the Tennessee game and the Viking game, where you had those 2 games during the year where it was double both bad, where you couldn't stop the run and you couldn't stop the pass. There was just nothing to hang your hat on defensively speaking, which was what this last game was, where when they wanted to throw, they could throw. And then when they wanted to run, they could run 185 yards on the ground in doing so. And so that's where you do get worried about, is like, you got to have something you can hang your hat on defensively. And right now with this new scheme, it's harder than it was last year, because at least last year you did have the 4-3 under. You were always going to have the 5 guys on the line of scrimmage versus the 2 we have right now, basically. Well, no, I guess we got 4 now. So you'd have 5 essentially.
Yeah, but 2 of them are standing up, right?
Right. 2 of them are standing up in an outside technique, which is, again, open. That's what, when Brennan's mentioned that wide 9, it's essentially that you've got those guys on the outside shoulder of the tackles, and you got these defensive tackles down right around the center. And there's so much space between those 2 guys to be able to run a natural play right up over that side. And it's going to be a wide hole. And not only that, those guys are going to try to correct around it, and they're going to have to sometimes really shoot and fire to get that much distance, as opposed to just 2 gapping where you're just either shoulder. And that gets them running out of plays then, like we're talking about with Darrell Taylor a little bit. So they're learning their way here, Brendan, with it, but they can't learn it too slow here, or it will be kind of bad on both ends defensively going over the rest of this season.
Yeah.
One thing I want to talk to you, this is a kind of a bit of more of an advanced topic on this, but I think it's important because, Brendan, we're in the midst right now of this rebuild movement, and understanding then when we get to the point of potentially being elite or being more on our rise, the sort of the new lessons or what you got to take away and how you go about what you do. Like, we think they're maybe fitting to the blueprint of 2012 right now, for instance. But you look at this Atlanta Falcon team and where they're at right now, and similar to us, and that this is their turnover year right now. They understood coming in, okay, we don't have Calvin Ridley situation, Matt Ryan trade. We're going to have to just kind of maintain the course. They had an awesome draft. You and me, Brendan, both love this draft where they hit all 5, their first 5 picks, Brendan: Drake London, Arnold Ebiketie, Troy Anderson, Desmond Ridder, and D'Angelo Malone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's an awesome draft. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say they also ended up with Mike Vrabel's son, I think in UDFA, a guy that I actually scouted a little bit and kind of liked. So there's another one.
I didn't have a chance to check him out. So there you go. So it might even be even better in retrospect, but there's a lot of work there for them to do to get that roster back. They were just going through what would have been their Super Bowl window, and they weren't ever an elite team, but they were certainly not by what we might think naturally, but what they probably thought in the building at that time as they went through 18, 19, 20. Okay, we're in our window right now. Now, they were a team that built themselves towards the offensive side of the ball, and that's the way they wanted to do their window. We're going to pay Julio. We'll have another wide receiver. We'll go and draft. We'll have a good offensive line. The defense was kind of secondhand, other than Quinn being your coach. Is there any lessons that you walk away from looking at them through their window and their time there and say, okay, here's where they went probably bad. Here's where you look at the Falcons in retrospect and say, this was the misstep?
I think the misstep was kind of just being delusional about whether or not their window was open. I agree that they thought it was, but it wasn't. And, a great example of what I'm talking about is 2019, the Falcons got off to a terrible start. I think they were 4-8 at one point. And it looked for all the world like Dan Quinn was going to get fired. Everyone knew it. It was like, yep, you're going to get to the end of the year. He's going to get his pink slip the next day. And then the Falcons won 4 games at the end of the year, meaningless games, nothing to play for, mostly against bad teams, I think. And then Atlanta went, oh, okay, we don't have to fire him now. Cool, we're just going to bring him back. Everything's fine now. And then the next year they start 0-5, looked like the worst team in the league, and he finally gets fired. But it's wasted time, right? Like, you basically blew up a season that maybe you didn't have to blow up, keeping a coach who clearly wasn't any good around. So more than any one specific personnel decision that Falcons team made, I always kind of look at them as kind of being just delusional about what they had. They weren't in that window anymore. And clinging to a guy like Dan Quinn, and to a certain extent, maybe clinging to a guy like a Matt Ryan when they weren't going to do it for you anymore, that's the lesson that I learned.
Yeah. No, I think it's great point. There were some signs there that this team wasn't as good. I think in a lot of what you're saying is you know, like I've said with my 4-tier groups that you have, where you're either rebuilding, ascending, in between, or you're elite. They were more in that rebuilding, they were more in that in between phase. They just didn't understand it or recognize it. And that's again why recognizing it is so important, because if you don't kind of put yourself in the right category of things, you'll make decisions like you're in the different category, and then you're like in being in between, which is the worst place to be. You're just stuck for years, kind of spinning.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think they did a good thing trading Matt Ryan this last offseason. They probably should have done it a couple years ago.
Yeah, agreed.
Maybe, I mean, they ended up getting a decent haul for Julio Jones, but maybe they should have traded him a little bit earlier than they did. Like, just to kind of compare it to us, I'm not saying I loved the decision to trade Wilson at the time, but I respected it. I respected the HE double hockey sticks out of it, because it committed to something. It was like, okay, we haven't made a deep playoff run in 7 years. Let's do something else, anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the Falcons probably needed to do, and they didn't. I think their last playoff appearance 2017, I think.
I think it was that Super Bowl where they lost that Super Bowl, wasn't it?
The next year they lost to the Nick Foles Eagles. So they made it that year. I think that was it, though.
Yeah, then that'd be it. So 18, I guess, would have been it.
Yeah, the 2017 season, 2018 playoffs.
Right.
And then they had 2 really bad years, or, well, 1 year was average because they won those 4 meaningless games at the end of the year. And the great opportunity to cut bait, and they didn't. And I think that's the lesson. And maybe we've already learned that lesson because we've already made the Wilson trade. We made the Wagner cut. We let some of this stuff go. And that's to me the ultimate lesson of that Falcons team. The other mistake they made, real quick, was just, this is kind of, I don't know what they could have done about it, but they kept the wrong coach. They had the super genius in the room, and they felt obligated to let him go. And now they really regret it.
Well, and that was going to be my contention, because I think it's a 2-part. I think what you said is the main thing, that again, you mistook what you really were and where your franchise really was in context versus the rest of the NFL at that time. And you were sort of hoping for a good break to get you through, as opposed to dictating that break in the way you built your roster and the coaches you brought in. But if I was to say that secondary aspect, it's okay. This new model for a lot of NFL teams is we're going to build the offense up heavy, and then the defense will just kind of get by. But there'll be so much resources we pour into offensive side of the ball. It'll be, ridiculous. And they were a team that was standing out ahead of one of those teams that was doing that. And that they were really always pushing that down. I mean, after you just drafted Calvin Ridley, you're back there going to Pitts a couple years later. And the defense was sagging at times. If you're going to choose that, as I say, choose the lane, choose the full lane. Don't have the offensive-minded coach, or have the Shanahan, or have just an offensive-minded coach guiding it at that point, rather than trying to counterbalance everything. And that's, to me, again, I'm trying to put my legs in both lanes, where I'll have a head coach who's defensive-minded who will be able to coach these guys up. And no, he still needs the talent too. It doesn't just take a bright defensive mind to get you over the top, not in this modern NFL day. I think it's more than ever, Brendan, wouldn't you say, dictated by truly having talented guys, and that's the requirement.
Yeah, it's kind of like when we were talking this offseason about us potentially drafting a guy like Derek Stingley or Sauce Gardner. And there were some people in my chats who would say, why would we bother spending a top 10 pick on a corner when we have Pete Carroll? And it's like, because of what he could do with that top 10 pick. It's the same idea. Like, if you have a great offensive coach, give him great offensive pieces and watch him go to work. Yeah. Like, if Kyle Shanahan can make 2 Super Bowl runs with Jimmy Garoppolo, imagine what he's going to do with a real quarterback. It's the same basic idea. In fact, we already saw it. He turned Matt Ryan, a good quarterback, into the MVP of the league. So I agree. I know there's a temptation to try to, straddle the fence or sit on the fence or whatever, but I think it's a very good point that you've made. And maybe more teams should think about things that way.
And if we look to our team, it's look, you got a defensive-minded head coach. We know with the team being impending in as far as sale goes, he's not probably going anywhere no matter what over the next couple of years. And so, okay, let's build the defense then. Let's get a defense that's rocking. And I don't care if it's modern offensive NFL. Let's just commit to this path and approach then. Let's not try to straddle that on both sides. Let's commit to being able to run the ball on anybody, and let's play defense and great special teams and see where we can take this. And I'm perfectly fine with it. And I think they will, Brendan. I think you're right. Team has learned their lessons on this in this regard. They did not do the Wilson thing till the bitter end. They got as head of it as they could have. I think they would have done it last year if not for the $38 million versus the 26 it was going to cost this year in dead money. So they certainly are learning those. They're not making those same kind of mistakes of what Atlanta did there. But you don't want to get yourself in between, Brendan. I still maintain as a franchise, that's the dead zone. That's the in between. That's the upside down, whatever you want to call it, is being an in between type team. Because you'll talk yourself into being a contender. You will tell yourself in the middle of the night, "Oh, how good we are." It's like, no, you're 8-9. You're 9-8. That's as good as you can hope to expect.
Or maybe you're 10-7 or 11-6. That's still not good enough sometimes.
Yeah, especially if you're doing it by luck of a ball bouncing your way, or you're getting a couple calls in a couple games your way, as opposed to you've driven out there by just how you've played. Because there can be some 11-win seasons that aren't all built the same way as well. And yeah, you got to. It's the important part, man. Because then once you know if you're in the elite stage, Brendan, that's when you do go for it. That's when you pedal down. And the one thing I would say is, they spent a lot of money on Ryan through the years, but I don't ever know if they really ever went pedal down. They were one of those teams to me that they weren't penny pinchers. It wasn't like they weren't spending money, but they were also always trying to think it was always kind of in-house. Like they had that pass rusher for years that they went with, that first round pick, who had that one good year in the Super Bowl year.
McKinley?
No. It's the other guy. He had one good season there for their Super Bowl year.
I know who you're talking about. But
I know,
the name.
See, that's how much he sucked. He's not even, but they kept him run. They kept trotting him out there for years when it was obvious he was that 1 year wonder guy, even though he had been drafted really highly, as opposed to trying to get aggressive and finding a better answer out there in their pass rush. Because if you're going to get up offensively, then you need to have a pass rush that can seal the deal on the opposition side of things when they get a chance to pin their ears back. And the Falcons never were able to really pull that off, in my opinion, with that defense and the way they had it constructed. So got to just know what your philosophy is, know what you want to do as a team and how you want to get it done as well within that. So a little bit of a bipolar nature to the way that they went about that.
Well, about Vic Beasley?
Vic Beasley. That's it. Yeah.
Okay. There we go.
Yeah. He had the 1 year, 18 sacks, and every other year he couldn't push past like 6 or 7, I think was like his max. And it was always never, it was like a week 6 and 7 where it wasn't like high pressures, no sacks, but it's like no pressures and a very little like coverage sacks is what he could get.
Yeah. How does that happen? How do you just have that one dominant year and then it just fades?
See, I think that they got up on teams by so often early on, they would just get up in the points, and that got them in a point where he could just do a lot of pass rushing, not worry about the run. And they weren't as offensively dynamic through those other years of his time there. And so they weren't up as in games as much, and he had to be more of a balanced defender. I also think that he was like I think a Twitch guy who never really had the polished stuff and never developed the polished stuff. So he just kind of was always that. If he couldn't get by with that, he wasn't going to get by with that. And he did kind of slow down, I think, really quickly in his career too. He bounced around a little bit and then he was out of the league like that. He was gone. But you gotta move on. If you ain't the right guy, man, don't get yourself married to people in this league. It goes too fast and you can just get yourself then stuck for, years at a time. But all right, so we got this game coming up 1:00. Oh, you're muted.
LJ Collier, Brandon is talking to you right now. I don't know if you picked up on that or not. He's talking to you right now.
He needs to go back into the back of the practice squad and go sit his butt down. I don't want to hear from him until at least mid-season. And then I will give him 3 snaps a game to show me something. That's all he get. Mm-hmm. He is still on the roster, isn't he? Dear goodness. He's going to be here all year, isn't he?
I guess he has to be. I mean, whatever. He'll be out of here at the end of the year. Like, what's the difference at this point?
Boy, we so need some defensive line help. If only we had like a first-round talent that just was waiting to just pop to somewhere, Brendan. If only we just had some guy that we had taken in the first round we need anything. Somebody, can you give us anything? I mean, even just a couple plays. No, he can't give you that. I mean, just LG, a couple. No, I don't. I give you 1 in 50. Give me 50 snaps. I'll give you 1.
Yeah.
1.
All right. Well, whatever.
Whatever. All right. Well, we got a 1:00 game here at home. I haven't seen the weather. How's it over there on the west side? You guys getting rainy, wet so far? It's getting a little colder over here.
Not for me, not right now. I think it should be okay.
So we should have a pretty good we got a game where conditions won't be crazy with that. So that's going to keep things pretty level. We both agree here. We want to stop the run, right? Stop the run, get Mariota to throw. Defensively, we've got to find a way to get some pressures once we get them throwing. we didn't talk about it, but we got to get back to running the ball here, right? Offensively speaking, too.
Yeah, I checked. The Falcons' starting nose tackle is Anthony Rush, our old friend. He was here for a cup of coffee, right?
I do remember Anthony Rush.
Another huge dude, by the way, 360 pounds listed, so it's probably like 480.
Oh, you know it. That's
Yeah.
that's the line. Just take it down a little more. A little more. It's not. But this is what you weigh. Yeah, but it looks bad. 410 looks bad on the sheet.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like he's off to a very good start. PFF has him graded as one of the worst defensive linemen in the league so far. So this is an opportunity to be able to run the ball a little bit on a team that you didn't necessarily have against a team like the Niners. They've got Fred Warner, they've got Armstead, they've got Bosa. Hard to run the ball. But this week, you should be able to do it some. You should be able to at least be as efficient as you were against the Broncos, right?
Yeah, their linebackers are not awesome. Grady Jarrett's more of a pass rusher, I'd say, than he is a run defender. So this should open the door to them be able to do it. But Brendan, it's going to take them committing to it in this game, and that means not having Geno throw 2-1 here. And that's the thing that really we're beyond them just attacking and using. Just commit to running a little bit. I can't believe I'm having to say this about a Coach Carroll team. Commit to run. It's never been the thing I've ever had to say, but that's kind of where we're at with it right now, aren't we? And when we're reviewing this is that we have to kind of beg them to do it here through the first two games.
I agree. And also, I was looking up some other stuff. Some of these guys, like Troy Anderson's not even really playing yet. So he would be one of their linebackers that I would be concerned about in the run game. But if he's not playing, then that's another thing that you don't really have to concern yourself with too much. So far, PFF, I know, likes Taquan Graham, one of their defensive linemen, quite a bit. But overall, I look at this linebacker core like you, and I see some guys that you should be able to do all right on. Is Deion Jones out for the whole year?
I don't know if it's the whole year, but he's still out for multiple more weeks.
Okay.
I'm looking at this week.
Yeah, that was one of their main guys. So, yeah, if you can't run the ball on this team, then who can you run the ball on? And did you see that Austin Blythe is still not practicing? So we may be moving forward with Kyle Fuller.
Oh, they love themselves some Fuller, man. It's only a matter of time before you're going to get some Kyle Fuller action.
I'm not going to pretend Fuller is better than Blythe. He's not. But Blythe was bad run blocking. Like, Blythe is a problem as a run blocker for the team he's on. So part of me does wonder, if we get Fuller, is he going to be a little better as a run blocker and maybe we run the ball more now?
It's one of those things when the guy sets such a bottom baseline, like bottom of the league baseline, the next guy, even if he's pretty miserable as well in that respect, is he at least going to be a bit of an uptick over the top of that. So I mean, Fuller is what he is. It sucks he's coming in, but we knew that was going to be, a likelihood to happen at one point or another with it. And, Blythe is like, he's held up as a pass protector, but yeah, you're right. He just can't do anything right now in the running game. I mean, you certainly can't have him one-on-one against a defensive tackle. And even the combo block stuff has just been really clunky and not timed right. They look like guys playing together for the first time there in the interior of that line with their timing and stuff.
And, I can turn to my right now and watch Ethan Posick playing well for this Browns team that is running all over the Steelers.
Oh, geez.
So not great.
Yeah, no, not great at all. And the center position just continues to be one of those ones that we just can't seem to ever get a guy in there. Doesn't matter the years, doesn't matter the second round picks we put into it. Just can't quite figure that one out. That'd be one that I'd like to see them at the top of the list to address this offseason. Should Gabe Jackson still be playing?
I guess he has to because Damian Lewis is out, but
should he when Damian Lewis comes out? Damian just needs to be, when Damian comes back healthy, put him at right guard, put Phil Haynes at left guard, and let's call it a day.
Yeah, and Phil Haynes hasn't even played that well this year. I fully admit that. But what's the point? What is the point of playing Gabe Jackson? That's the thing. He's not going to be here next year. And if he is, something went wrong because he's going to be, 34, 35, already breaking down, already falling off as a player. So what is the upshot here? What is the positive outcome of the Gabe Jackson thing? If you play him and he plays well, okay, I guess that's a little bit of a positive, but so what? He's not going to be here next year. And if you don't, if he doesn't play well, then that's really not a positive. So yeah, I agree. Gabe doesn't need to be playing anymore, especially if he's going to play like that.
I'm even okay with taking Curhan. Just try Curhan at this point.
Mm.
What has Gabe given us in the year and a half he's been here to necessitate him being on the football field? Past the trade, this is one of those things. Well, you did a trade for a 5th round pick for him. Well, okay, past the trade and spending money on him and paying him a good amount to be a below average right guard. What at any game has he done to really be that guy in there to be that whoa, you're really feeling his presence down there. Like some of the blocks I was seeing with him when you brought him over the Raiders, where you could see some highlight blocks from him, was like where he looked kind of mean and nasty, and he could hit some guys in the open space. He can't do anything in the open space anymore. I saw him fall over his own feet at the line of scrimmage, running 2 steps to his left this past week, and I just, like you said, there's not in the long-term future, not giving you good play now. Let's try somebody else out there at the very least in Curhan. Maybe he's got some potential there. And certainly Lewis will be better in that right guard than he is at left guard when he comes back.
Yeah, I will say, let me just say one thing real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Lewis playing decently at left guard when he's actually been able to be in the game. That Niners game, I think he was actually playing fairly well before he got hurt. I know it's a small sample size, but I thought he played fine. So
I admittedly didn't concentrate too much on him. So that's good. That is good. If he can give us something there, then that's fine too. But whether you're moving Damian or not, Gabe, just if he keeps putting performances like this, we got to try somebody else. That's just, he's not giving us that stable veteran presence we were supposed to be getting with that trade, unfortunately. Fat Daddy Stacks with a $2 donation. Thank you, Fat Daddy. He says, LJ Collier, break glass in case of emergency.
Well, I mean, you break the glass, you get in there, and the axe is like it's broken, right? Like there's no head on that axe. There's no fuel in that fire extinguisher. It's like you break glass because of an emergency, and there's nothing in there. It's like that's not good. That's really not good.
Yeah, off the snap, the fire extinguisher is just making this sound. Just that's the only sound that thing's making when you pull that thing off. That Collier extinguisher.
Yeah, like that's when the inspectors haven't come by the building in 40 years to make sure you're up to code. So all your extinguishers are just like, no, we need like the break glass in case of emergency would be like playing DK Metcalf at right guard or something. At least that would be kind of funny.
It'd be exciting versus LJ, who's not going to give you anything exciting. If he's up on the football field, that's just going to be another sad story.
Mm-hmm.
Poor LJ. But hey, at least he's going to be a NFL pro for 4 years without having to do a whole lot on the field to do that. That'd be a first round. It's great to be a first round pick sometimes. It's nice big.
Yeah, that's the weird thing. He can't even get on the field. You would think with Pete apparently liking him so much, you'd force him out there. It's the same thing with Eskridge. It's bizarre that even the guy who drafted you won't force you out there just to try to justify it.
To me, it's again too with a little bit of they take some time on certain players where you go, why do you take so much time to figure your stuff out? I mean, Collier coming into this offseason should have been cut June 1st, instantaneous. You saved $1 million by doing so. You knew what he was at this point, but they just hold on and clutch on to something that's been so obvious almost from the day he was drafted. And that's the part to me where it's like, you got to move off a guy. Everyone's going to make wrong choices. I'm not going to hold your feet to the fire unless you just keep, no, we can make it work when it's obvious you can't make it work with the guy. And it's not a big problem because we got other issues with this team that are far beyond LJ Collier. And I think that they've probably fixed a lot of the philosophy that caused them to draft Collier in the first place. So that won't repeat, but you got to move off. If guys, I don't care if he's a first round pick or not with guys, they just did it with Marquise Blair. They decided we don't want him with that. They did it there. But for some reason, LJ gets a little bit more rope here, which I don't get. Marquise showed me a lot more in games than LJ ever did, even in his short time period.
Right. I think part of the LJ thing was you were able to keep him without using a roster spot on him because he was hurt. That obviously helped. If LJ wasn't hurt, I wonder if he would have been cut.
I would hope so, Brandon. I hope you would be right on that. That it's simply the injury, and they didn't want the injury settlement. And when he finally is active, that they'll just release him at that point when that time comes. We'll see, because I think he'll be healthy at some point this year. And maybe they just become so desperate, they're like, let's try something. Let's get another guy out there. This is just too awful.
Well, I'll tell you, this week they're going to play Miles Adams probably if Shelby can't go, right?
Yeah.
If after Miles Adams, there's nothing left. You would then be down to LJ Collier at that point. So it could happen.
It could happen. We just go in the room and he's sitting there in that room, just kind of waiting. Like, all right, they're all down. We're going with you. Yeah, let's go. And then he bursts on the scene, finally realizes his potential. Joke's on us. finish it up there, Brendan. All right, so we got this game this week. We're going to stop we want to stop the run, get Mariota to throw the ball. Let's run the ball a little bit more. Let's take a couple of deep shots in here, Brendan. We've got that's our formula for the success in this game to get the victory. Let's get to what you actually think is going to happen. How does this game play out this week? What's our rhythm here? What's our rhythm?
I want to come out running the ball. I usually don't. I usually never say that. But we've now kind of come out throwing the ball a couple games in a row now. 49ers game kind of arguable because we never had the ball. It was really hard to tell what the plan was because we were down so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to try to establish the run from the start. I want to make sure we get these running backs some carries. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But through 2 games, I just don't feel like we're giving the running game enough of an opportunity to say whether or not it's working.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how I want this game to start. And I do believe that if you execute, you're going to be able to move the ball in this Falcons defense. They're not particularly good through 2 games. They've given up a lot. And I would definitely start with that. And honestly, that's kind of what I want to do this whole game. I just want to run the ball a lot. Run that Pete Carroll offense. When you throw, take deep shots.
Mm-hmm.
Try to take the top off of the defense. Play that Pete Carroll ball. I think I would probably go with that. I don't know. I just feel like we've had Geno throw the ball way too much over the first 2 games. And I want to at least start striking fear into opposing teams that, hey, this is a thing we can do and we can do it well.
Yeah, agreed. I think those moments will be opened up there. It wasn't a lot on the tape that you were running those routes, but there were some rare moments there. If Geno had looked deep to DK, there was a spot there where he could have hit him deep and let it rip. So I do hope that they do take that track. What do you see? How do you see it playing out though? What do you see happening in this week? Are you going to be able to run, or is this a stifled offense on our side? Then we stifle their offense, and then we're just kind of grinding through to the end until whoever sort of scores a couple of touchdowns is who pulls it out at the end of the game.
I think it's going to be points. I think we're getting points.
Oh,
I think the Falcons have put up some points in their first 2 games. They've shown they can move the ball and score. And I think with what happened last week, it's that slingshot thing you talk about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Slingshot, you have a really bad game on offense. So all the players on your offense get into the practice that week and they're like, wow, that was embarrassing. We can never let that happen again. So they go out there, do what they need to do to get better, come up with something to make sure that doesn't happen again. And I think you do see a much better Seahawks offense in this game against a defense that'll be a little easier to play against because they don't have those, oh my God, pass rushers. They don't have those linebackers that really strike fear in you. And I think that even though I don't think this offense is ever going to be great this year, I think they can be great in this game.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I think this could be a similar game for Geno as that Jaguar game. If he can lock in like that, where there's going to be time to throw in that pocket, he's going to have time to survey. He's going to have time to hit those deep shots and let him develop down the field. He's just got to be patient and then let it rip, Brendan, with Geno. Let it rip. Don't always have to see it open. That's another. He's picked up a couple habits with Russell there. The pirouette as he tries to spin behind that out. Sometimes you see where you're like, that was not early Geno. And then the other thing and maybe this is Carroll being in his ear, but I need to see it to throw it thing, where especially on the deep stuff, as opposed to, where he's going to be, let it rip. You trust your timing on the route, trust your man's going to be in the right position, and it will work. So I hope he can do that in this game. That's going to be the key for him, hitting those deep shots. So with that slingshot, and the Falcons are slingshot a little bit too. They're 0-2. Obviously, they're a little bit desperate to get their win. They did spend this whole week on the West Coast, Brendan, so they didn't go back home because they just played on the road with the Rams, and they've stayed here.
I saw that, yeah.
Kind of odd. I always think that's a little bit hard on players, asking them to do that. And I have never seen that really work successfully for teams to do it that way, where they stayed on just one coast and it was for the best. I can see the theory behind it, but I don't feel like it's worked well necessarily for teams trying that. Do we get the win this week, in your opinion? Are we able to pull it off?
I'm going to say it's a tie. I got a tie. 27-27 tie. That is what I'm going to predict.
27 tie. Okay. All right.
Okay. No. I kind of, this feels like a coin flip to me. I don't think we're necessary. I just don't think Atlanta's that good. I know they're playing competitively, but you also have to look at it and kind of go, they were down 28-3 on the Rams, and the Rams definitely let their foot off the gas. Rams made some mistakes to let them back in that game. So I don't want to give them full credit for making that a competitive game. So I'm seeing two pretty lackluster teams, and I'm saying at home, yeah, I'm gonna say we find a way. I don't feel amazing about it. I'm gonna say something like 27-24.
I love it. I love it. Well, me and Brendan are in unison on this one this week. I think we were last week with the 49er game, and we both had that, I think, as a loss.
No, I said we would lose if Kittle didn't play, or we would lose if Kittle played, and we would win if Kittle didn't play. And well, we sure did not care that Kittle was not in that game. Clearly.
Oh yeah, exactly. It seemed to not make a difference. Well, Brendan's trying to get back on the off the schneid. Then he's 0 for 2 to start things. I'm 2 for 0 in my predictions, but we are going to be something's going to happen this week, Brendan, because we're both of like mind. I'm going to actually say that Seattle comes out. The crowd has an effect. They really come out to try to kind of turn things kind of around from that really poor performance against San Francisco last week. I think we get this 24-13. I'm going to give us a big win in this, and that's probably too many points. But nonetheless, I feel like this is a week that feels a little bit like that Jaguar game of last year. I'm not trying to undersell the Falcons, but you made so many good points about the fact of where they are from a personnel standpoint. And this is just not a team that's very talented across the board. It doesn't have any unit that you go, that unit scares me. That cornerback room scares me. That defensive line scares me. There's a player here, a player over there, player over here. But there's not what we've been dealing with even the last couple of weeks with a couple of teams that we've gone through, and certainly not with what you have to deal with that Niner defensive line. This is a much easier task to go around. So I will go 24-13. I feel good about it. Like I said, I'm 2-0 out the gate, so I'm trying to stay undefeated here on my predictions on this, Brendan. But I like where this team. I like this matchup. Stylistically, this is a good matchup for us. I feel like. Just a good stylistic matchup. Roxanne Roll, thank you for the $10 donation, Roxanne. It says, past Hawks speak of virtues, the Legion of Boom era team that made them great, closeness and accountability between players. Do you think this team coaches can find those virtues and flash glimpses of the Legion of Boom era? Very good question, Roxanne. Thank you for the donation. Is that something that you can attain once again, Brandon? I think she's right in that that's a general beyond just being a Legion of Boom thing. I think that that's a thing that you see on teams that are great, is that closeness and accountability between players. And that it's the combination of the two. Because if you're just chewing somebody's ass out all the time, no sugar, just no carrot, just the stick, so to speak, it's not going to work. You need the closeness, and you need hey, I'm coming at you from a love standpoint, as opposed to coming at you from just to deride you at every turn. Can we get back to there again? Do you get the feeling of that in this team as far as the foundations they're laying in that respect, or too hard to tell, too early to tell?
I think you can get there. I think in terms of just that virtue of closeness and accountability, I think you can. I see it with guys like Quandre Diggs, I think a little bit. I see it with guys like Jordan Brooks, I think a little bit. It's too early to be sure one way or the other. I think that I can't pass judgment on it yet. But I am seeing the foundation being laid for that. We've said many times over this offseason, I like the way this team is being put together. Like the most recent draft was really good. I like some of these pieces. It's so hard to know what the personalities are. Like I at this point in time, I can't tell you what Boye Mafe's personality is because we haven't seen it. I can't tell you what Kobe Bryant's personality is. I could certainly tell you what Richard Sherman's personality was because we got to see it so much when he was here. So
loud and clear.
It's going to take some time, but I think we can get there. I do.
I do too. The place I always push back on this, Roxanne, is I always say when people bring up the Legion of Boom, how do we recreate the Legion of Boom again? Or how do we find, and to me, that's a once in a generation type defense, probably a once in an NFL history type defense, if we're going to be just in the way that they went about their business. And I just don't think that it's repeatable, that you're going to find that many Hall of Fame guys and the scheme is just the right time. The part, though, that is repeatable is the part you're speaking to, which is and that's why I said it's not as much a Legion of Boom thing as it's a great team thing. This is what you see in Super Bowl teams thing, which is that taking accountability, and part of the accountability is what Carroll did with Cam Chancellor when they were right at this young precipice of turning over. And what it is, the coaches take the players and the young players up to a certain place. We got you all the way up to the well. Now you need to bring the bucket up. Now you need to take responsibility for pulling the well water out. And it was, yes, coaches were holding those players hard and accountable, but it was them themselves holding each other accountable. That's that closeness accountability. That's that stick in the carrot. That's that ability to not just be buddy and we're all tight in hell, but then I can't call you on anything and I can't hold you to a standard and we don't have a high standard that we're trying to set. And that's where Brendan's right. It is a little too early here, Roxanne, to say that we know we got those guys in the room right now as it is. That's going to have to develop from within. They're going to determine that. Not Coach Carroll, not the coaching staff, not the way they coach him. But when the players actually realize, do we want to make something special here? Do we want to do that? Do we want to just be an NFL player? Do I want to come here 8 to 5, do my job, try to make my money, get my couple contracts, and I'm doing what I can do? Or do I want to build something bigger than that? Because that Legion of Boom team had big starry eyes on what they wanted to create, and they were willing to sacrifice that to get there for it. Hopefully this team does. I think the coaching staff and Carroll will get that message across that that's what it takes to get there. But that's going to be the key on that one is the players themselves jumping forward there and saying, we want this. We want this to be like that. Not repeating Legion of Boom, but to repeat what Super Bowl teams do to get to where they're going.
Yeah, there's no repeating the Legion of Boom in terms of talent, I don't think. They just get that out of your heads. It's not happening.
Yeah, that's not happening. But the closeness, the accountability, getting leaders from within that can then drive the team forward, that's the part that we're in right now. And that's the part that it's too early because there are so many young guys. But that will be the next step of this, Roxanne, is those guys now coming, okay, we've got the talent's here, it's developing. Now who are going to be the leaders to take hold of this thing and take responsibility and push this forward further than just where the coaches are taking them up to? And that's hard part to predict. Some teams put the talent together, Roxanne, and those players never come to the forefront as far as leaders go. All the talent in the world, no leaders. Sometimes you got all the leaders and no talent. So it's you got to get it right all the way down the line on that one. Got to get just perfect. All right, so Brendan and me both got wins. Brendan's got us winning by just a couple points. I got us winning by more than a touchdown in this particular game, but we do feel like I've been calling it bounce back week, Brendan. Bounce back week, Brendan. That's what we're calling this one. So I feel like we're going to come back. It's nice to come back and play this game on the whole home versus going and having to play 10 a.m. in Atlanta. This would be just a crappy week to have to go turn around and go back and do that. So good to come home. If you're in that stadium, please be loud. Help these guys out this year. They need as much help as they ever did before. So please, if you're in that stadium, make sure that you're doing everything you can to absolutely get these guys hyped up and impact Marcus Mariota out there as much as we possibly can. Any final thoughts on this game, Brendan, or anything that you have on your mind as we finish up here?
Not really, man. Just hoping to see something a little more, at least a little more serious than what we saw against the 49ers. Just even if you don't win, and I do expect to win, but even if you don't win, show that you are not one of the worst teams in the league, which is what you looked like last week, because I've kind of died on the hill that we may be bad, but we are not one of the worst teams in the league this year. So if you are not one of the worst teams in the league, then you're going to give Atlanta either an L or you're going to give them everything they can handle.
That's right. And that's well said. For us, it's both been about the process this year. We're not looking as much at the results in the win-loss. We understand what we're going to be dealing with in that respective things. But the team can't look like the league worst. This is not a league worst talent. They got to get more out of this team than that. They've got to be competitive. And that's to give us that confidence going forward that we're in good hands and that this rebuild is going to have a bright future, as opposed to United instead saying, we hope it'll have a bright future. We can't say we know, we hope. And I don't want to be leaving this year going, we hope. It's a little uncertain. Still a little bit more to be determined on that. I want to be in much more firmer hands. Say, no, they built on the offseason. They got better as the year went along. This team's coming along. This team's moving. It's going. So thank you as always, Brendan, for coming here. Please do go to Seahawks Brendan Nelson's channel here on YouTube and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Also, do me this favor here on this live stream if you can for me, and that's hit the like button. It does help this channel grow, helps us show on the algorithm with YouTube. So I really do appreciate it when you guys do that. Other than that, get ready to feel happy this week, Seahawks fan. We think we're gonna get a win this week. So get ready to feel a little bit better than this last week when we lost to our rivals, the 49ers, which never feels good. Though, let's face it, Brendan, it rarely happens as well. So I mean, it's not like something we have to deal with very often. So every once in a while, it's like that cold you get once every 5 years. Huh?
Yeah. Are you a Niners fan on Sunday night, by the way? Just real quick.
I am.
You think it's not easy, but I think you're right. I think
I
we got
want
to be.
I want Broncos in full tailspin. I want it to be the planes doing this towards the ground and parts of the plane are flying off of it. You know, the windows are popping out, bodies are leaving the like. I want that for the Broncos season this year. I don't care who I've got to side with. I don't care what evil I've got to side with to make it happen. Damn it. Well, thank you, Brendan, for coming over. I really do appreciate it. We're going to have Brendan back here on Tuesday on this as we do a post game on this, hopefully in a celebratory post game in that. So we'll be back over here on my side of it there. But get ready to feel happy this week, Seahawks fans. We're going to get this dub. I can just feel it in my bones somewhere deep. And so let's get this dub. Let's go Hawks. Don't forget it. Go Hawks. Brendan, you let them know.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks, baby.